Today on Ascend the Great Books podcast, we finish our 12-week journey through the Odyssey. We are finally here. We've made it to the end. It's been a very beautiful journey with all of you. We've had thousands join us to read the Odyssey. I'm humbled by all the support and all of you who are getting to experience the joy and beauty and truth of Homer the teacher, Homer the philosopher, and to guide us through these last two books. We have two wonderful guests from Hillsdale College. We have Dr. Benedict Whalen and also returning to the podcast, Dr. Justin Jackson. And I can tell you this, you were not prepared for this episode. I was not prepared to host this episode. I was not prepared for the amount of yelling, the cursing, the arguing, the passion that was thrown into this. This is the first episode that I pretty much just had to hang up on. I just had to end the call so we could finally all go home. And why is this? Well, Dr. Justin Jackson shows up in rare form. And somewhere in the beautiful chaos that is our conversation, he decides to challenge a lot of our presuppositions, a lot of our assumptions of the Odyssey right here at the end. And so right before crossing the finish line, he really asks us, do we know the journey that we've just been on? Do we actually understand the path, the route that we have just taken? So he does a wonderful job of being contrarian and making us think about what is it that Homer actually offers us in this perennial text, in the glory and beauty that is the Odyssey. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation. And also stay tuned to the end after the kind of beautiful chaos that is this conversation. I'm going to sketch out our schedule. We're going into some Platonic dialogues, we're going into some short stories, and then we're going to read Plato's Republic, one of the most influential, if not the most influential text in all of Western philosophy. We're going to have a very deep, slow dive into this fantastic text, which can honestly change your life if you take it seriously. But before we jump into that, let's have recourse to our guide, our 100 question answer guide that's posted on our website, and read the summary of book 23 and 24. So what happens in book 23? The old maid Eurycleia, laughing with delight, runs and tells Penelope that the day she's dreamed of is here. Odysseus has come home. Penelope's heart bursts in joy upon hearing that the beggar in the hall was actually her husband. Penelope, however, falls back into her guarded skepticism, and she enters the hall and sits in silence, studying his face in numbing wonder. Meanwhile, Odysseus counsels Telemachus on the threat of the suitors being avenged, and asks that the whole house be full of dancing and merrymaking to hide the fact the suitors have been slain. Odysseus is bathed, and Penelope instructs her servants to drag the marital bed out of the chamber for this strange man to sleep on. Odysseus falls into a fury, as he knows the marital bed he made cannot be moved. It is made of the stump of an olive tree, still rooted in the ground. Odysseus passes the test, and Penelope runs to him and embraces him in tears. Odysseus tells her of his penitential journey that he must undertake to appease Poseidon, and after the two delight in each other, he tells her of his journey home. The book ends with Odysseus, inspired by Athena, going out into the country to visit his father. And what happens in book 24, the final book of the Odyssey? Hermes leads the souls of the suitors to Hades, to the fields of Asphodel, where they meet Achilles and Agamemnon. One of the suitors tells Agamemnon their story, and Agamemnon praises Odysseus, calling him happy, and praises his wife, Penelope, in contrast to his wife, Clytemnestra. Meanwhile, Odysseus and his men arrive at his country estate, and he elects to test his father, Laertes. Laertes passes the test, and Odysseus reveals himself to his father by showing him the scar. Elsewhere on Ithaca, the families of the suitors have discovered their deaths, and cries arise in the city. The father of Antinous rallies the kinsmen of the suitors to take revenge upon King Odysseus. The bard, however, warns the mob that the deathless gods helped Odysseus, and the prophet, the seer, tells them it was due to their own craven hearts that the massacre occurred. Athena intercedes on Odysseus' behalf, and Zeus declares there should be peace in Ithaca. The mob arrives outside the country estate, and Odysseus, Laertes, Telemachus, and others prepare for combat. Athena strengthens Laertes to spear Antinous' father in the head, and then she brokers peace between the two factions. Welcome to Ascend the Great Books podcast. My name is Deacon Harrison Garlick. I live in rural Oklahoma with my wife and 5 children, serve as a deacon at Holy Family Cathedral, and as Chancellor and General Counsel of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Tulsa. My free time, I like to help people read the great books. And that's the purpose here on Ascend, the Great Books podcast. We can be like a small group to you, help you read the great books. We've got things on the Iliad, the Greek plays, many of Plato's dialogues. We're diving back into Plato after we finish the Odyssey. So join us for that. Check us out on X, YouTube, Facebook, and Patreon, and also Instagram now. We appreciate all of our supporters. Visit thegreatbookspodcast.com. Okay, so we are actually bringing our 12-week study of the Odyssey to a conclusion. We've done this before the new Christopher Nolan movie comes out, which will be awful, but I'm still going to go see it because I told you guys I would see it. So I regret all of my choices and promises I've made on this podcast. But so we'll have an episode going over that. And also, then we also are going to have Dr. Patrick Deneen of Notre Dame on the podcast, author of Why Liberalism Failed. He's going to join us to discuss his new book, The American Odyssey, What an Ancient Story Reveals About Our Divided Souls. That comes out on July 21st, the same day the book is available on Amazon. So, but today we are discussing book 23 and 24 of the Odyssey, and we have two fantastic guests to guide us through this. Returning to the podcast, we have Dr. Justin Jackson, who currently serves as the chair and professor of English at Hillsdale College. He came on to discuss Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. We have two wonderful episodes that he joined us for that. He also teaches courses on Old and Middle English literature, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, biblical narrative and poetry, existentialism in literature, all kinds of good stuff. Dr. Jackson, welcome back to the podcast.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
We also have first-time guest, Dr. Benedict Whalen, who serves as the Associate Professor of English and also the incoming chair of the English department. He holds his PhD in English from the University of Nevada. He has a BA in English from the University of Dallas. Teaches courses like Great Books in the Western Tradition, Renaissance British literature, Shakespeare's tragedies, Hemingway and Fitzgerald, all kinds of good stuff. Dr. Whalen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
All right. So, Dr. Justin Jackson, you have a book coming out. Tell us about your book.
Well, the first thing I like to say is that if your listeners see me with a big smile on my face, I'm not known for smiles on my face. I'm a pretty dour guy. However, I will smile. I'm trying to suppress it as best I can. Is that I'm no longer chair. Come August, we're in a terrible spot. I'm between being chair and handing it over to my younger, more handsome, smarter, more eloquent colleague, Dr. Ben Whalen. I'm happy to do so. He's going to take us to the promised land. I'm like Moses in the wilderness. I've been told by God I am not allowed to lead them to that place. I shall be buried in a place unknown. And here we are, we have him. He's going to correct every wrong thing that I say today. And I just love it. And I love the fact that he's here with us. His online course is going to be spectacular. And he's just the greatest. And so I know this is effusive. And no one outside of Hillsdale will get it. That's fine. But yeah. The book that I've written with Dr. Dutton Carney, we spent 20 years on his porch smoking cigars and drinking bourbon. And precisely 4 months of those went into thinking about the book. That's terrible. I'm sorry. Dutton, I know it's not true. We really were thinking about the book. We did it because what we found was we had highly educated students who couldn't read literature, who couldn't read the Odyssey. For the most part, that's where some begin with the Iliad, some in our department begin with the Odyssey. But what we found is students who can score, 1,400 on the SAT. You say, hey, here's a book. What can you do with it? It turns out nothing but regurgitate what smart people, semi-smart people have said to me. I can regurgitate what AI says to me. Okay, so then we just want to know, what can you say about this and what can you do with it? And it turns out over the last 30 to 40 years, we've slowly developed a system where we don't require that sort of introspection from students. And so Dutton and I wanted us to get back to, what does it mean? Why do they use this word and not that word? Why is this word repeated? Very simple things. It's not you used to get the books like how to read, I don't know, how to read literature as a professor. I never used any of those techniques at all whatsoever. I just did simple things like, here's a text, here are words, a word's been repeated, an image has been repeated. Hey, this rhymed, this didn't rhyme. Why not? Just the simplest things in the world. And so Dutton and I decided to take a page out of Strunk and White. They have elements of style that was used for Cornell University. And so Dutton and I thought, oh, we'd write a book for the college and a handbook for how to read literature. And it was pretty simple and basic. And so I hope our students like it. I hope other students like it. It's just basic from ninth grade till you graduate from college. And then even then I've had a grad student at Oxford send me an email like, hey, remember all those handouts you gave to me? Could I get those again? Because I've been in the world and I forget what it even means to just read a piece of literature. And so I sent him the book, and he won all sorts of awards just from a simple reminder. Oh yeah, we actually read the poetry. That doesn't mean that history and culture isn't important, but it means that our reading of the poetry should make us yearn for the history and the culture. The history and the culture should not make us yearn for the poetry. I take it as the exact opposite. And I'm pretty vehement about this. And this is easy because Ben's here. It's an English prof. We're text guys. We think the text ought to be dictating all sorts of things to you. So I hope your students understand that when we come to the Odyssey, it's not what does it give us of Greek culture, Greek history. Is there an aspect of that? Of course there is. Must you learn it? Yes, you must. That takes time. But it should be the text that sends you to all of those questions and not the other way around. The text does not exist as a cultural artifact. The text exists for us to learn, like, how am I Odyssean? And I am more Odyssean in my old age than I ever wanted to be. I'll just say that. And I'm not comfortable with it, but here we are. And that's essentially what my book is trying to do, is just everyone's afraid of everyone in the conservative movement is afraid of subjective reasoning. I would simply offer to you, what else is there? Doesn't mean you go with feelings. It means you can go with your rationality, logic. But what the only thing you have is, what does the text present to you? How are you engaging with it? And then if you say with feelings, whatever those are, with feelings, great. You read it when you were 15. I think most classical schools teach Homer to ninth graders. I mean, I couldn't read Homer till I was 30, for the love of God. I was teaching it from 22 to 30. And I don't think it was until I had my child when I went, oh, I can teach this. We teach it to ninth graders. So this is to say a subjective reading is not wrong. Come to it with that. Let it enrage you. Let it spark whatever love. If you're a bro and you're like, yeah, Odysseus is my guy, great. Go with it. Love it. I hope you will change at some point in your life. But yes, I just don't think a subjective reading is the wrong way to go. In fact, I think it's precisely the right way to go. Even if your subjective interpretation is god awful, it called something from you. It called to your heart. Run with it. Fight with it. I fought with the Odyssey for 14 years at the very least. I hated Odysseus. I kind of like him now. Uh, Just to give you some sense, but you asked about the book. That's what the book is actually about. Can we dissect things in an intellectually honest way from wherever we are in our lives? And can we let the text open up to us? Ready? Subjectively, so that it maybe changes us.
No, very good. That's good. That's a good teaser. I appreciate that. So
Thank
everyone
you.
has to go check out the book. We also appreciate you giving us a little bit of a foretaste of how you read the Odyssey. That's very good. So before we jump into the actual text, which I'm excited to get into, I want to go back to Dr. Whalen. So God bless you, incoming chair. It seems like Dr. Jackson's quite excited about that. Picking up,
Punishment,
yeah, just picking
punishment
up
for my sin.
a few subtle vibes of his. I'm kind of intuiting that. So but tell us. So you have an online course at Hillsdale coming out on the Odyssey. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the well, as you already alluded to, Christopher Nolan's upcoming film, and who knows what story that is going to tell and what that is going to present to the world. But the idea at the college was it will certainly provoke interest in Americans in the world in what was the Odyssey actually about. And so the college asked me to film a course that'll be coming out at the beginning of July. And they did a very nice job with it here. Great production. They sort of made a setting as if it looks like I'm sitting in a Greek temple on on an island in the Mediterranean. So very beautiful job they did with it. And yeah, I just walk through the books of the Odyssey, making some interpretive arguments, but at least giving those who want to take the course some sense of what Homer actually wrote. As opposed to whatever Nolan is going to show.
Yeah, no, that sounds fantastic. And I really regret my choices of telling everyone on the podcast that we'd have like a, response episode and I'd go see the movie. And I promised that a long time ago when we just had a poster. And now, yeah, big mistake. But anyway, no, very similar vibe to you all. So that's why we did this. We've already covered the Odyssey. We covered it in 2024. We did a year of Homer. So we actually just did one book each week for a year. Really enjoyed that. But it's actually incredibly refreshing to come back and read this text. Just simply because Ascend is, I think, on like the 50, 60-year great books reading track. We move pretty slowly. That's one reason I really enjoyed Dr. Justin Jackson's Substack, because I think he's the only project I know of that moves slower than we do. And so kind of going through, the text, I think has been pretty good. Okay, but let's dive into the actual text. I'm excited.
Just real quick,
Yeah.
everyone will tell you who knows me. I'm a very slow man.
Okay. Okay, let's look at book 23. So we're looking at The Great Rooted Bed is what Hal Fagels entitles this. So this is, so for first-time readers, right? Oh, we're going to get our warm, fuzzy, beautiful, romantic meeting between Odysseus and Penelope. And so this can really kind of turn, on your expectations, right, of what you actually expect in this text. So just a few things just like to open it up. So obviously we have Eurycleia, the old maid, and she's coming to Penelope to tell her that Odysseus is home. And her text, I find this really fascinating. So around line 30 or so, she says, he's the stranger they all manhandled in the hall. Telemachus knew he was here for days and days, but he knew enough to hide his father's plan so he could pay those vipers back in kind. Now we all know that Eurycleia also knew. She doesn't admit that now, but she will here in a minute. And this is what I find interesting. It says that Penelope's heart burst. And the reason I flag this is simply because one of the questions we've been asking ourselves as we kind of have gone through the back half of the Odyssey is, what does Penelope know? And when did she know it? Because we kind of have this thing of like, Odysseus is in disguise. It's a divine disguise. It's not like he just went outside and rolled in the dirt. He's in a divine disguise. But those who seem to have known him can see him. And they can see like, oh, it's familiar. You remind me of Odysseus and these types of things. So if we have the cowherd and other people being able to see Odysseus, do we not think then when Penelope is talking to this beggar, which by the way, if you remember that book, when she talks to Odysseus the beggar, she's very open with him and shares all kinds of things with him, asks him to interpret dreams, does all these things of, I don't know how you normally treat beggars, but I thought it was very interesting in how forward she was with him. So I noticed in this read through, as we see Eurycleia, we see this whole scene of Penelope having to digest this news. When she hears that it was the stranger and that heart burst, I always wonder if that's confirming the feelings that she had. I've always felt that she intuits more than she allows herself to give out or trust. Maybe we could explore why that is. But it's one of the passages here that I really enjoy is Eurycleia coming and telling Penelope.
Yeah, I agree that she intuits or more than she allows herself to consciously wrestle with, or in another way, she both knows it's Odysseus and doesn't know it's Odysseus. It's there's sort of that contradiction in her very heart. The last time we saw Penelope, she had been insisting to the suitors and to Telemachus to give the old stranger the bow. And then Telemachus sends her up to her room and Athena puts her to sleep. So it's actually, it's interesting here that she has this sort of doubt and hesitation when she's the one who came up with the plan to get the bow out and arm Odysseus in the first place.
Yeah, and she also advocated for the beggar to give it a shot.
Yeah.
It's like, who could I marry here? Well, what about the beggar in the room? He seems great. We could pick him.
Right.
So one of the things, though, that, I think we could ask ourselves as we get into this text is, why does she have this level of skepticism? Why is she guarding her heart like this? So it says that, her heart burst. But then if you jump over to, around line 70, the mask comes back. Her being guarded comes back and how she discusses these things. But the story can't be true, not as you tell it. No, it must be a god who's killed all our brazen friends, up in arms at their outrage, heartbreaking crimes. And even talking about the scar does not do it. That's been the sign. That's been the sign that we've seen. So one of the things that as I kind of have pushed into, why does Penelope have this reaction? Why does she have to have this extra proof? I think one of the things that on this read through really stood out to me, she seems to be more sensitive than most of the fact that this could be a god that wants to trick her, and that the god can take on the guise of Odysseus, even down to the scar. Earlier in the text, she warned Telemachus of this, that this could be a god. And now in this text, she seems to allude to it actually several times, that this could be a god in disguise who's come. And so, which, we see this all the time with Zeus and et cetera, right? They come down. So I think that's the way that I tend to read it, is the reason she has this guardedness is because that extra level of skepticism is she knows that there could be a fraud here, that even can mimic the scar and everything about Odysseus, except for their esoteric knowledge that they have.
Yeah, it's she her caution is good too, because the way the text sets it up, the behavior of the suitors has been so outrageous that it seems to be calling out for punishment from the gods. So she might be sitting there sort of nervously waiting because punishment could take a lot of different forms, and it could take the form of some god appearing as this vengeful old man, but it not be Odysseus himself. So it's a situation calling for the gods. So she's nervous that a god might in fact be here, and not Odysseus.
So what do you take of, so we have this test, right? So we finally get all three of them in the same room. We have Penelope, we have Odysseus, we have Telemachus. And, poor Telemachus, I think, is trying to figure out what's going on here in this scene, right? He still has his maturation. He still has his coming of age that he's kind of going through. What's interesting here, though, they're sitting here, they're staring in silence. Numbing wonder filled her heart as her eyes explored his face. And Penelope actually says, right, that we have secret signs known to us, but hidden from the world. And Odysseus seems to at first be very familiar with this, right? That she has to test him, right? That he has to know this, right? He has to test these things. So I wonder, Dr. Jackson, you want to jump in? You're muted.
Guys, this is between a man and a wife, and she's like, I've got secret signs. We know how we're one another. Yeah, I'm sure they do. This is what our 18-year-old students don't understand. The wife was like, we'll figure things out. The wife is so much smarter than the man in this episode. It is beyond belief. And again, all my students will attest, I am no feminist. They'll all tell you this. I'm okay with men and women's roles in the ancient world. Right. And that should be directive to you here. Because the wife knows exactly what a husband is going to do. And whatever cultural norms or laws you have for this patriarchal society, I'm sorry. It's the same with our own. When you're in the bedroom with your wife, I think we all know it's a matriarchal. I could be stupid. I may be wrong here. But I think we know there's a little give and take between patriarchy and matriarchy here. And so I just find it hilarious that she's kind of going to her son, yeah, we have secret signs wherein we'll know one another. They were beloved. They knew each other. He built his bed in the house. I find this, what would I say? And maybe I'm being too modern here, and that's fine. Not fine, just dismiss me, that's fine with this. But every time Telemachus steps up and tries to assert an authority, it's kind of brushed aside either by Penelope or Odysseus, which is, boy, you don't know nothing. Like, this is a husband and a wife, and I'm speaking here with two men who have wives, and you guys outnumber me by God knows how many kids. But there's a way in which husbands and wives just know things. And so I take her little thing here as a tongue in cheek, like, yeah, we'll figure this out, boy. There's nothing that's going to separate us. And I'll go a step further because you're not here yet in the text. She's going to get the upper hand on him. She's going to work him over. He's going to submit to her, like I think we all do. Because and not in an unmanly way. I know you guys like your thumos and your masculinity, and we should be masculine before our wives. But maybe the most masculine thing you can do is to treat your wife as an intellectual equal who has you and will just, if you push up too hard, she's gonna take it and she's just gonna eviscerate you. That's what she's doing to him. Not in a negative way. That's not what I mean. But when it says she tried him out, that's a phrase that's only used with Odysseus in the text when he's trying to dupe other people. And they use it with her. She's going to try him out. How do I get this man who's in disguise to reveal himself? Who's been able to do it? No one. In other words, my whole position here is very simple. This is a wife who understands the household is whole with a husband, and a husband will understand that a household is only whole with a wife. She's working him over. She wants to make sure. With regards to there could be gods, it could be a god. I think you're right. I have no problem with that. Yes, of course. She wants to know. Even if you're a god, I would go this far. Even if you're a god and can dupe me in answering this question, I'll go that far. But I have to know, do you know the answer to this question? Because only my husband does. Both of you know right now that your wife could ask you one single question that only you know. No one else knows. Only you know it, and she could ask you. That is a deliverance of the thing she's looking for. So, whatever misogynistic reading you're looking for in this text, it has to crumble immediately. Because what she's doing is to say, I'm on equal standing with you.
It's really interesting, right? Because the text, Odysseus over and over again to Telemachus and then to Eumaeus is, but don't tell Penelope because we're going to test the women. And, you know, Agamemnon told him in the underworld, the time for trusting women is past. So you got to come in with all this caution and testing. But I agree, Justin, here it's really wonderful because we come in as readers expecting Odysseus to lay out the test. He's the one being tested. She flips it on him. And
she breaks him. She breaks him.
He does. And it's also interesting to me because I think he's not even really aware yet of how she is going to test him, because the line right after she says, we have secret signs known to us both, but hidden from the world, Odysseus, long enduring, broke into a smile. Right? He still thinks he's in command here, right? And now it's also a great moment. It's a great moment in family life too, because she's sort of smacked down Telemachus, and Odysseus turns and talks to Telemachus too. So the great moment of reunion where man and wife are finally together. There's a kid there, and they sort of talk to each other through the kid rather than addressing each other directly. So it's a really wonderful moment. And I'll share one last thing that I think is interesting is then this gets repeated at the beginning of book 24 with his father, where he comes to his father and he's going to do his thing with his made up story. But his father then actually insists, no, prove to me that you're Odysseus. And Odysseus breaks down there again. He doesn't keep up his. So there's an interesting parallel there in this reunion with the wife and then the reunion with the father.
What do you? So I tend to have a very strong view of Penelope. I find her to be, it's a beautiful character. So when I read that, so there's two things that I took note of. One is that I interpreted, now it depends on how you read what she does. We can push into now the bed narrative. What he says, you know, your words cut me to the core. That he actually is surprised by this. Like this actually makes him upset. Because how I interpreted his smile is that I also see this to be a test of Penelope. Because Penelope being guarded, Penelope saying, you have to prove yourself to me, all of that is a testimony that she has been faithful, right? This is not something that she runs right into. She is still very guarded. She's still very guarded with someone who even looks like her husband, right? So even though she's the one doing this test, I also found this to be a test of her as well, that she is communicating something to Odysseus by doing this.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that, I'm interested in your thoughts as well. I don't think those are necessarily competitive. Because I do think maybe not the misogynistic reading, but I do think that the second point that's caught my attention here is the comparison to Orestes and to Clytemnestra.
Yes.
And so here, you know, what happens to Penelope if she steps out of Athena's will? What happens to Penelope if she was to impede Odysseus's homecoming? So even though Telemachus, the way that Homer can write Telemachus as a young man and all his angst, I think is really great.
Yeah.
But even when he stands up the first time and says, you know, I hold the reins of power in this house, it was very interesting then that Penelope then goes back into her chamber, right? There is a way in which, if Telemachus is going to step and play the Orestes role, what does that mean for Penelope and her adherence to this plan overall, right? So I think here too that I found this also to be a somewhat test of her. Maybe test isn't the wrong word, but a testimony of her dispositions and where she is. So let's move to the bed, though. I mean, just a beautiful. I mean, it's one of the most famous scenes, right? I mean, a lot of people know this culturally from the Odyssey, which is interesting because then I think sometimes they misread it as this, beautiful homecoming, etc., kind of like somewhat romantic tale. But the imagery of the bed, right? So just like very clearly, Penelope has this wonderful line, right? She's setting this up, tells Eurycleia to move the bridal bed, right, the marital bed out so Odysseus can sleep on it. And he, right, breaks, woman, your words, they cut me to the core. How could they move my bed? And if I understand this narrative, basically he's building his house, he's building the bed chamber, and there's an olive tree in the middle. And then basically what he does is he cuts the olive tree down, he keeps a stump, and that stump then becomes one of the posts of the bed. And so it's rooted, right? It's still root. You literally cannot move the bed. And the imagery here seems incredibly beautiful, right? So this is the marital chamber. This is the bed that can't move. It's a sign of fidelity. This is as Dr. Justin Jackson mentioned earlier, this is an area of the home that only they know. We've seen Penelope several times. She comes out of this chamber when the suitors were there, right? This is an inner sanctum to the house itself. So, I mean, what are your thoughts, though, on this passage overall? And do you think that it seems like from Ural's reading, when Odysseus, says this cuts me to the core, is that where you see that Penelope has, quote unquote, manhandled him? That he's like with Laertes when he breaks down crying, like he has this emotional reaction to this, and this what do you want to call this? The man of twists and turns and the queen of matchless cunning are in a dialogue together, and this is where she gets the best of him because he's the first one to break.
Ben, go ahead and take that.
Yeah. She does know how to provoke him, how to dig him in the ribs there with. So it is, I think, part of the proof that this is indeed Odysseus and not a god who looks just like Odysseus is precisely that. It's not the knowledge of the bed, because a god presumably could look down and drift in there and see the bed and know how it's made. It's actually his emotional response to the allusion to the bed that shows him as deeply human and the man that she knows. Like, she has the wife's knowledge of how to hit him in the ribs.
I like that. I like that a lot. No, that helps me a lot because I've always kind of wondered that, like, well, could the god not understand how the bed was made? Could the god not understand the bed? So it's Odysseus' reaction to the wife's comment that then actually shows him to be Odysseus himself.
Yeah, I think there's a simple, and everybody knows at this college I'm the dumbest man at the campus. And so I have very simple responses to literature. If you're a dude, what do you want to know about your wife? She's been faithful. Okay. Can we begin there? If we can't admit that, then we're doomed. We don't actually understand the poem at all whatsoever. This is a man, maybe more manly of a man than we can imagine, who expects his wife to be faithful. I would expect those of us who are the least manly of men, I include myself in that lot, to expect their wives to be faithful. Now, here's the flip side, and this is going to drive people it'll drive them nuts. Caught myself on that one. It'll drive them nuts. Because then the question is, well, can't the woman expect that from her husband? And in the Greek world, the answer is, ready? No, you can't. Not even legally. Legally, boys will be boys. Man, I was born in the wrong place at the wrong time, I tell my wife. You're born in the wrong place, the wrong time, because the boys can do what boys want to do, and legally, it's true. Women, don't go out to the marketplace in certain clothing. You're not allowed to have a lover. Men, can you have one? Oh, baby. Yes, you can. What's Odysseus' real desire in the poem? This is what I love. I'll defend the man now in my old age. I actually understand him now. I did not understand him in my youth. It took me a long time to understand Odysseus. A long, long time. Because of my stupidity. What does he want? He simply wants life with his wife. There. 7 years of getting a PhD in ancient literature and medieval literature. It taught me that men actually enjoy lives with their wife. There. Because when he's with Calypso, what does she tell him? Hey, baby, not only are you sleeping with a goddess, that's gotta be great, I imagine. I don't know. But I'll also make you immortal. After he's seen Achilles, the greatest hero in all of Greek history, who just is like, I just give me life, not death. I don't take Achilles' language as pacifistic. As much of a pacifist I am, I do not take his language as that. Just so your readers know, you don't have to bring what you personally think to a text and make it be true. You don't have to do it. I'm pacifistic. I want to go, oh, Achilles, oh, yes, you've learned war is bad. Oh, thank you. Because do you know what his next line is? It sucks being here. I prefer to be a slave to some farmer who's ripping up dirt clods than to being dead. He's just saying life's better than being dead. Because his next line is what? Tell me how my son is doing. Is he bad? That's a rough translation. Is he badass amongst the Greeks? That's all he wants to know. So now you're stuck in two worlds. I don't like the heroic ethos, but how's the heroic ethos working out? Do you understand? That to me, that's the most powerful image we get in the poem. Because you're going from the Iliad to the Odyssey. I don't like it, but how's my boy doing? Oh man, for those of you who have kids, I hope you understand this is our world. You ought to look at it carefully and closely. You think your kids are just reading the Odyssey, they're being classically educated, oh blah blah blah. No, 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 no. They're being asked to make a choice. What are you going to do? Are you an Elon Musk? Ready? I'm going to be mean here. Or are you a Father Deacon Harrison? What are you choosing? That really is that's the, if you want a polarity, it's not an either or. It's also, and you're going to hate this, especially the Catholics. It's not a both and. It's a spectrum, baby. What are you going to do with it? Good luck. Odysseus is going to have to figure out what he wants to do with all of this. He can go one way or the other, but Tiresias has told him, not a glorious death. On the sea, my friend. Oh, baby. Oh, God. That ruins the whole poem for us, I think, which I love. It ought to ruin the whole poem for us. I think the Odyssey is Homer coming at us with just shotgun going, you want the Iliad in this poem? Bet you don't. I'll bet you do not want the Iliad in any way, shape, or form.
Well, the Odyssey has, I mean, that's one of the things that I think surprises people when you read the Odyssey is that both Menelaus and Nestor seem to have a lot of regrets of the Trojan War, right? They're not coming back and talking about the Kleos, the glory. I mean, even several Menelaus' statements of what he could trade again to have Agamemnon back, while he's even sitting next to Helen, I think is really fascinating. But that all deeply tethers into this book and into the next one. And actually, one of the things that you mentioned of him in the Underworld is we're going to see a comparison in book 24 of his Odysseus' fate compared to Achilles. And I think we really have to take Homer seriously of why did Homer wait to talk about the funeral of Achilles until the end of the text? I think that's an important question. Here, though, I just want to point out a few things as the lawnmower's right outside my window. One is the theory I mentioned about her being worried about a god, right? She actually mentions that explicitly down at 250. The other thing, though, that I would mention is what is the relationship between Odysseus and Hercules? And when we saw then that he interacted with Hercules in the underworld to a certain degree. We had this interesting thing in which he has a shade there, but he's also enjoying the feasting on Mount Olympus and etc. But I'm very interested in your thoughts here because I noticed that he at like a little after 280, the way that Fagles translates this is, so they've had their, they Penelope and Odysseus, they have this recognition. One of the very first things he tells her is, by the way, I have to leave again, which has always really struck me as being really fascinating. And he has to go on this penitential journey for Poseidon. And we can talk about that. But one of the things that I notice here is he says, one more labor lies in store. And there's different ways, you guys probably know better than I do, but there's different ways to read his story in 9, 10, 11, and 12 and how you count them. Does he have 11 or 12 labors or episodes there? And it terminates then with him meeting Hercules. And Hercules talks about his labors and these things. So it's really interesting to me that as we get towards the end of the text, we're getting comparisons of Odysseus' fate to other heroes, to Achilles, to Heracles, to these types of things. And here then, I think there's a certain way you can read this in which his penitential journey is his 12th labor, that he has to go forth and do this. He has to be, almost an evangelist for Poseidon, right? To take this oar and to march inland until they think it's a winnowing fan. And you guys might know better than I do, but at least in biblical literature, the winnowing fan is always a sign of judgment. It's always a sign that something has been judged. And then he has to make these sacrifices. So, any thoughts there on him and his as he tells Penelope about this journey that he has to go on?
Yeah. I do think the in comparison to Heracles is present there. And Heracles, of course, one of his things was that he went to the underworld and came back. The catabasis, the journey to the underworld and back of the epic hero. Odysseus is fulfilling that. But it's one of the fact that he has this last labor is one of the wonderfully unresolved events at the end of the Odyssey that parallels, I think, actually the unresolved nature of the Iliad also, in that Troy is not actually fallen by the end of the narrative. There's actually, Achilles is not dead, though we know he's heading to death. Here, Odysseus has not completed his labors, though he's gotten home and purged his house of the suitors. So there's a nice parallel between the two decks. There's a certain unresolved, undetermined nature at the end of both narratives. Here, it very much has to do with becoming a missionary for the cult. He's got to establish the cult of Poseidon in inland, and I find that very funny itself. Like on a deep level, this whole part of this narrative is about Odysseus surviving the wrath of Poseidon, and by the end of the story, he still hasn't actually resolved that wrath. It's also, on the heroic level, though, it's also a testament to some of Odysseus's greatness is that he can actually survive Poseidon's wrath in the first place. It seems to kill almost everyone out, but Odysseus can survive. So he's a survivor, he's an endurer, but he's not even done at the end. So you have this, and to your question, why he says this right before going to bed with Penelope, I think that's also interesting there, because you could think, oh, we've resolved everything finally. Suitor's gone. I've got my wife in my arms, and no, it's really not. Human life goes on.
Dr. Justin Jackson, you just mentioned a second ago that his death, one of the parts of Tiresias' prophecy is that his death will come from the sea. What I think is interesting is that line gets translated in two very different ways.
Yeah.
So, for instance, in Fagles, it's that he'll have a gentle, painless death far from the sea. It comes, which is more ambiguous. Like a lot of people read that as like he won't die at sea, that he does this penitential journey for Poseidon and comes back, and then he won't die in the sea. So, I mean, any thoughts on that, on how to read that passage historically?
Uh, I think traditionally, I think they pick up on it in a non-Fagles way, that he will die at sea, not absent from it. And let's just take out the philological, grammatical argument, from or at. That's where we are, is it not? So let's just look at it logically, narratively, and that's what I mean by logically. God. Um, let's just look how it plays out. This is a man who doesn't want to die. We know it. He doesn't. And yet, this is a man who gives himself over to death because Calypso says, "Hey, baby, you want to sleep with a goddess? You want to be immortal?" That's, of all of Dante's Inferno, that's a temptation, man. Good luck if you ever didn't have to run into it. I don't think we have. Do you know any mortal? Do you know any of your friends who have been tempted by, "Hey, baby, sleep with a goddess and be immortal"? I don't think we have. And if there's one man in this world who I know ought not resist that temptation, it should be Odysseus. He's the only dude I know who could go, yeah, no, thank you. Everybody else, what? I don't know of them. Okay, so then what do we do with his infidelity, his desire to, because he clearly slept with her. Text makes it clear. He slept with her until she was no longer desirable, or whatever Fagel says. It makes very little difference. If he doesn't put that, it's a bad translation. I don't know what to tell you. But he still longs for his. That should tell you something. In fact, and now let me just tip my hat to your Catholic viewers. Do you have anything other than Catholic viewers? I don't know. Here's the Maximian reading of it, St. Maximus Confessor. Odysseus's desires are correct. He desires the domestic. He desires a wife with whom he can love and live out the rest of his days in happiness. That's Ecclesiastes 9:1. He spends a year with Circe, and his men go, "What in God's name are you doing?
Right.
Don't you know we want to go home?" And Odysseus says, "Yes, we do, in fact." Is he a man who can be distracted? Is he a man who desires home? Beyond the immortal, beyond sleeping with goddesses? Ready? And I hope your female viewers appreciate this. Odysseus desires his old wife because she's old at this point. I know. I'm 50, we'll go 50 plus, close to 60. No wife wants to hear that. But this is an old man who said, "I want my wife and not you goddesses. I prefer finite existence in my wife's embrace over eternal life with great sex and food." That, to me, if you want the most conservative argument, or you want an argument for life and family, I give you Odysseus's argument. And I was harsh against the guy my entire life till I got married. And it was like, oh, I see the argument now. I thought you're just a degenerate piece of trash who doesn't understand temptations. That was me as a young man. As an old man, it turns out, Odysseus, forgive me. I, I I get it. And I think he's a decent chap. Do I think he does everything well? I do not. But the one thing I do not begrudge him in any way, shape, or form, we'll get into it. I do not like how he comes back to his community. I do not like the slaughter of the suitors. I do not like the bellicosity. I hate it, in fact. Hate it. But the dude's a good dude because he does it all mistakenly. I'll just say mistakenly. And you guys can rip at me for this. But he does it all to secure a place for a wife and his son. I'm actually okay with that. Not with regards to I hope you understand. With the fictionalized violence, could I ever bring it upon myself to do what Odysseus did? Oh my God. No. Ben, even if you stiff me in poker, I'm not doing that to you. Because Ben would be the only one stiffing me in poker. It would never be the other way. But even if you did that to me, I could not do what Odysseus did. I can only do what Odysseus has done in his positive life, which is to love his wife beyond his own mortality. And I find that to be quite beautiful. If your readers for your readers who hate him, and I did for many years, if you can hold on to one thing you love him for, I would hold on to that and then build around it and then go, okay, we hate him for, I went the opposite direction. I hated him for, and then eventually it was like, oh, yeah, he's actually, he's not that different from me. And so I go from there. So
Justin, you use the language of his different temptations, and I do think, I think it's of the utmost significance that he chooses Penelope with death, but that's after he's been in the underworld, so he's seen what death looks like, and he's choosing that. It's a pretty serious choice. But after that, then though, he comes to Nausicaa. And it's interesting. I was looking at it as I was reviewing here. In book 23, when he's made beautiful by Athena crowns the man with beauty. And there's this simile of, as a master craftsman washes gold over beaten silver. This is actually a verbatim repetition, including the simile of when Odysseus emerges from the bush and gets washed and comes to Nausicaa when he's landed on Scheria. And so I think as readers, we are supposed to see that as there's a sort of a verbatim parallel in these two episodes, because Nausicaa represented, I think, another temptation here. So yeah, there's Circe and Calypso, but Nausicaa too, the young princess who's beautiful and lives in this sort of Edenic peace land. He could choose that, but instead he's choosing old Penelope, rugged Ithaca, all the suffering and the messy political order that's there. That he's choosing that against Nausicaa, and Homer sort of reminds us of that by giving us this.
Ben, what's the book and line numbers on those? Do you have it offhand?
Yeah, I've got
give it to me.
Book
just for me.
So in book 23, it's around line 170 and down, and then it's book 6, lines 254 or so.
Perfect. Thank you. I was looking for the book 6 reference. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. That's a really wonderful comparison, because there's a few thoughts on that. One, it's always stood out to me that Nausicaa is not mentioned in his summary of the story. Now that's Homer. It's not exact, right? So it's not Odysseus. It's not a quote. It's Homer giving a summary, but it's still somewhat interesting to me that she's not mentioned there. I agree with you 100%. When we read those books on the podcast, we viewed her, if anything, actually, I think, more tempting than Calypso, because she is a younger Penelope. And so let me play a few of my cards here, which I think are actually really dispositive for book 23. I think the main connection that Odysseus has with Penelope is the noetic, that he loves her for her mind. He loves her because even when Calypso pushes him, Calypso can't understand this. She's an appetitive creature. She lives in a cave. She doesn't even have techne. She doesn't have a house. It's just basically sex and food and pleasure. She's a very appetitive creature. So when he says no to her the last time, right? She thinks it's because of the beauty of his wife, and she mentions that, and it's like, well, how can she compare to me? And it's always been interesting that he calls her wise Penelope. He says, well, wise Penelope can't compare to you in that way. And then very probably prudently, because he's captive by a goddess, doesn't actually close that comparison. And so I think then that, because I don't find Calypso to be, I find her to be that just embodied raw, appetitive pleasure. And I think that's one of the reasons that he says no to her, is because particularly that type of immortality is actually dehumanizing. That type of immortality where you're basically, gone is your kleos, gone is your thumos, gone is the intellect, the noetic. You don't sit there and have an intellectual conversation with Calypso over dinner. That's not how that works. Like, it's a very dehumanizing invitation to immortality. And I think the text really pushes that. The reference to Tithonus at the beginning, like the whole book is full of humans who became immortals, and it has gone terribly for them. Right. I mean, all of book 5 is filled with these very subtle examples that this is a very degrading kind of act. So in that, though, the way I read that, then Nausicaa becomes a huge temptation, because she's a much more natural temptation to him. And she's a young Penelope. She's very witty. We see that at the beginning. They can, there's quips and barbs back and forth. They test each other on guest friendship and etc. At the beginning. He can tell her things. She's civilized. And then you get this kind of Edenic utopia. They're I mean, unfortunately, it's Poseidon they're related to, but they're downstream from the gods. They have technology, which is, kind of a fascinating concept. So no, I really like the fact that there's I did not pick up on or have heard that obviously that's lifted from there. I think that's really fascinating. And her absence in the summary has always been fascinating to me as well. But the idea that the connection they have is not mainly, but the noetic. There's something there, that relationship of the mind that you can't, that's not going to be adopted by anybody else. You can't just artificially create that. And then to have this whole book be this back and forth, this cleverness, this this test. I think they have a beautiful relationship. I do.
Yeah, I mean, look, everything you bring up, again, I hope your audience is mostly married, because if they're teens, they aren't going to really understand much of this. There's something to the banality of consistency and a knowingness. Odysseus sees a young woman, and it's like, you're literally stupid with regards to everyday life. Why do I? Ben, and I'm not going to speak for Ben, so let me leave that off, because his experience is probably very different than mine. I don't want to get him into trouble, but I'm fine being in trouble myself. When I deal with 18 to 22-year-olds, they're all just freaking stupid. They think they know everything about life, and you know nothing. Literally, you know nothing. You're engaged. Ooh, engaged. Let me give you warnings. I've been married for 30 years, man. I read this text, and it's very, very different from how my undergrads read.
Well, I think that's part of that mimetic, right? The mimetic
But
power of this, right? You have
I
to.
agree 100%.
Yeah, I
And
mean, the
so
first time I read this, go ahead.
I'm mindful, because I know you have a lot of homeschoolers who are doing this. How do you even begin to teach this other than an idealized? But the whole point is, marriage cannot be idealized. Like, if we're going to take a position, and now let's be Christian for a moment, let me bracket the discussion. But if you're going to be Christian, there's no ideal marriage. That's stupid. I mean, that is asinine beyond belief. Why? Well, because we're each unique in the body of Christ. How are we going to work out? My poor wife discovered, my God, I married an appendix. He's useless. He may blow up and poison the entire body. That's what she that's what she discovered. Well, how do you deal with that? When you're told you're part of the body and you're not allowed to leave it, which the three of us agree. Maybe your viewers don't agree, but the three of us agree. That's how you deal with it. And it seems to me Odysseus is actually abiding by this. Except he may be the appendix. What happens when your hero is the appendix of the poem? What happens when that's the case? I listened to your previous lectures. You're not comfortable with him. No one's comfortable with him. We all hate him. None of us would let him date our sister. Would you? Would you? None of us ever would let Odysseus date our... Hell, we wouldn't let him date our best friend's sister. We would go, hey, yo, that's a really bad... And yet, here I am defending Odysseus. I hope everyone understands this. You can have two thoughts. I don't like the guy at all. I don't trust him in any way, shape, or form. But I still kind of, I don't want to say like the guy. I kind of love the guy. I don't know what, and I don't know what to do about it. I was literally hoping when you asked me, hey, can you do books 23, 24, or whatever? I really thought, okay, I've got an answer now. And I'm coming. And I've got an answer now. I don't. I wish I did, but I don't. I hate him, and I kind of love it. My hatred is stronger than my love, just so you know. But I do love the guy. That's brutal. Now, for me, as a professor of literature, the only question is simple. How has the text done this to me? Where I both hate and love someone and I can't resolve it. Am I just being morally obstinate? Do I just simply want him to be good and he's not good, and I'm not willing to say he's not good? Is that it? Could be. Could be. I'm a great lover of Nietzsche, and maybe I'll accept that critique there. Not here, though. I don't think that's the critique here. I don't think I'm going to be touched on that one. I think we all love him, and I think we all are very, at the very least, reticent. And the ancient world was, show me a text where Odysseus comes out okay in the ancient world. Just show me that one. I'd love to see it because nobody trusts him. I think I give more charity to him than the ancient world ever would. And now I'm going to be heretical, but that's okay. I think Dante's reading of him is the ultimate misreading that we've never seen, and it pollutes all of our students' readings of Odysseus, and I hate the fact that Dante ever included him in his poem. I'll leave it at that, and you can clean up the mess, Father Deacon.
By the way, does your wife come on podcasts? Because at this point, I'm just real curious what she's like. This on a daily basis. I mean, at some point we're gonna meet her. Does she make podcasts and great books? Because I gotta have her on.
If she were to, it would be but 3 words, and I'll let your listeners figure out those 3 words.
Okay, very good. Since we're throwing out assertions, but don't have to defend them, I actually really like Dante's treatment of Odysseus in the Inferno. I just think he nails it in a certain way. So anyway, but moving on. So you can contemplate that. Okay, the end. So maybe Dr. Whalen, like the end of book 23. Okay, so this is like, it feels like the pace. Then we just have to move through several things. So what stands out to me here is now he's immediately going to leave. He's got to go to the country estate. He's got to go to the farm. He's got to go see his father. I have so many questions about this, and maybe you guys can help me. I I don't know why is Laertes in the situation that he is. Why is he not king? Why was he dethroned or abdicated prior to the end of his life? Like, why did Odysseus already ascend? And then he leaves, and I think one question that a lot of readers have is that, so he's just at the country estate the whole time while he knows that his daughter-in-law and grandson are dealing with these terrible suitors the whole time. Like, why he's not engaging, he's not coming, like, why is he in this somewhat kind of exiled state? And two, I think here we need to talk about, and the text has kind of referenced this a few times, Odysseus talked about it with Athena before he ever acted, is now we have the problem of the blood avengers. Now we have the problem of the families. And Odysseus seems to intuit that this is going to happen very quickly because he's going to go see his father. But at line, I don't know, 415 or so, right? To go see his father, he straps on armor. And he takes Telemachus and the cowherd and the swineherd and takes them and says to them, you need to armor up. You need to take your weapons. We're going out to the country estate. So he seems to already intuit that this could happen very quickly. It's interesting to me, though, that then he just leaves Penelope at the house. He's just like, okay, we'll go back inside the bridal chamber, right? Yeah, go back into the chamber with your women and basically lock the doors. It's a very interesting passage here in transition to book 24. I mean, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, those are great questions. I agree that it's very interesting and curious to leave Penelope in what might look like a vulnerable situation immediately after having cleaned your house, to exit the city and go to this sort of removed estate is also very interesting. There's a parallel with the end of the Iliad, of course, where Priam leaves in book 24. He leaves Troy, and he and so there's this exiting of the polis in both cases. I think part of how I read the Odyssey as a whole is like the restoration of the polis through the restoration of the marriage, and it's the counterpart to the Iliad. This is in the simplest terms, but the counterpart to the Iliad, which is the destruction of the polis through the violation of marriage. And so there's a sort of answer and parallel there. But there are more parallels. So book 24, for instance, begins with Hermes leading the suitors' souls to the underworld, and that's similar to Hermes is the one who leads Priam through the Achaean camp in book 24 of the Iliad. So there are lots of levels of parallels. I don't know exactly why Laertes needs to be apart from the city. One of the things that interests me, though, about him is that when and maybe this is jumping too far ahead, but in book 24, when Odysseus comes up to Laertes, all of the details about the vineyard and the orchard and the trees are how well kept, how well tended it is. And so it almost seems like he's the capable king who's removed, and he's the one who can tend to things well, but Ithaca has not made use of him. Instead, he's disregarded or sort of in exile, as you say.
So let's look at book 24, because I love your comparison there with the Iliad, because then book 24 just seems to be replete with these narratives that are going to call us back to the Iliad, and then also this interim period. And so I had mentioned earlier, maybe even before we started the podcast, that one of the things that really caught my attention at the beginning of book 24 is that Homer has waited to discuss the fate of Achilles, right? His funeral and et cetera, these things, his kleos, until now. And I think the intentionality of that, to me, seems to be incredibly thick. And so what ends up happening, just like you said, Hermes, he's guiding the suitors down to Hades, and we see that everyone's kind of gathered around Achilles' ghost, and then, Agamemnon comes up. And it's interesting to me, because this happens twice, and I'm still ferreting it out. So it's really interesting that Agamemnon calls him Happy Man. And I think that probably has to be noted, because he's going to say the same thing about Odysseus and I'm interested in the comparison here. So then we get the story of Achilles' funeral, which again, as was mentioned and alluded to, we were deprived of in the Iliad because the Iliad ends prior to the taking of Troy. So we get this whole narrative. I mean, the muses come and sing at his funeral. I mean, you could not. I mean, to me, just as a simpleton, it seems like we're describing a funeral that just is not ever going to be repeated. Like this age, this heroic age of the gods and men, and this is not going to happen again. I mean, the muses come, they sing at the funerals. There's 17 days, etc. I mean, even the urn that they have comes from the gods as well. And then he's buried, if I remember correctly, like he requested, with the bones of Patroclus as well. So, I mean, what do you make of just like the beginning here of why we're getting such a thick narrative of Achilles at the beginning of book 24?
Well, and to add on to that, it's also interesting that this is down around line 30. Achilles addressing Agamemnon is sort of pitying Agamemnon because in contrast to the way Achilles enjoyed the full funeral rites of the warrior who gets the mound and the celebration, etc., Agamemnon didn't even get that. And that's, they both sort of agree, that stinks for you, Agamemnon. You didn't even get to die this way. And so he's the third figure. So you have Achilles' fulfillment of that sort of warrior death, Agamemnon ignominious death in your homecoming, Odysseus, he's going to have his death long afterwards in peace. But yeah, it's funny for readers of the Iliad, especially like book 1 of the Iliad. You take the whole thing, book 24 of the Odyssey, to see these men speaking in harmony, Agamemnon and Achilles both agreeing, Achilles pitying Agamemnon. It seems like such a perfect counterpart to book 1 of the Iliad.
So we move on then, looking at, I mean, I guess just to kind of stack on top of that, at 100, line 100, he says, "So even in death, your name will never die. Great glory is yours, Achilles, for all time in the eyes of all mankind." Because one of the things that seems that very clearly is happening here is that Homer is inviting us to then compare the fates of all these men, right? So who actually has the best? So we've had Achilles, we have Agamemnon. Now we're really kind of seeing what the fate of Odysseus is going to be, even though maybe there's some things up in the air. And I think maybe we could even toss in there Hercules or Heracles as well, simply because he was used as this contrast. And one of the things too that I have not given enough thought to, but I'd like to push into, is it's been mentioned several times on the podcast, this episode, that Odysseus does not want to die, but he declines the immortality. And so it's always been interesting to me, is like, is he trying to then figure out how to get an immortality that he actually would want or die? Like, he's seen death, and what is that? But the immortality of Calypso was insufficient and unsatisfactory. But what about the immortality that Hercules enjoys? What about the immortality that Menelaus has been promised as the stepson of Zeus? Is there something there that's intriguing to him? Does he want to kind of position himself towards something like that? I don't know. I mean, it's how well or how much do you push into the comparison between him and Heracles as well?
This has been an evolved position I have taken, but I kind of love Odysseus's position at the end. He's not godlike. He knows he's not godlike. He's not going to die a warrior's death. You're going to die on the sea in a wholly unwarlike way.
But don't you think, can I push back on this a little bit?
Yeah,
So
please.
is there,
I'm not actually making an argument. I actually find it funny that this is how he's going to die. I think it's great.
in a certain way though, it seems that Odysseus receives both of the fates of Achilles. So Achilles is offered by Thetis that you can either stay and die in Troy, and your name will be immortal. You have eternal glory. And we just got that, right? I mean, Agamemnon
But
basically,
how do you get eternal glory? How do you get it?
right, you have to die, right? So this is a
No. It's not you just have to die. How do you die?
well, you have to die in some, glorious way
Where?
thing
Where?
in battle.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so as long as we have that as our foundation, this is a glorious death. This is the way in which you go. I'm good with that, but let's proceed from there. And now Odysseus is being told, you're not dying in that fashion.
Right. I would push it. So we've already made the claim on even this episode several times that the writings of the Odyssey seem to critique in certain ways the presuppositions of
Correct.
the Iliad. So I would actually probably push into the fact that the thematic death, the glory that comes from that of the having the fame that never dies, right? That erotic appetite for immortality that can be satiated through glory and fame. I would actually argue that probably one of the ways that the Odyssey has a certain maturation over the Iliad is the fact that that can be done outside of a death in battle. Because it seems to me, and this again, please push back. It seems to me that Odysseus receives both. One of the ways that he's better than Achilles, if you want to take that argument, is that he receives both fates. So, one, he has the chaos of the journey home. He has the chaos of restoring his house, of doing what Agamemnon could not do. He also, by the way, has the glory of taking Troy. It wasn't Achilles that took Troy. It was Odysseus and several, interim feats that he had to do to figure things out, to find, and then eventually the Trojan horse, that he took Troy. So he gets all that chaos, but then the other fate of Achilles was, or you can return home and die in peace. And that seems to be what Odysseus is offered, is that he says that he will die in peace of old age, surrounded by those who love him. So I might make the argument here that in a certain way, if Homer is asking us to mature in understanding of the heroic and what it means, like, because I think the Odyssey has a much thicker anthropology than the Iliad does. Is there not a way then that Odysseus ends up having both of these fates? So if you look at what Achilles did and what Agamemnon did, Odysseus seems to be somewhat of a perfection of both.
Ben?
Yeah, I find that compelling. It is definitely a different vision of the heroic. Finally, if and uh the it's like a vision of the heroic that wants life. That doesn't throw it all for the blaze of glory, and I just think that's just a very different sort of thing. The part of what's going on here too, though, is as we get with the souls marching down to the underworld, and then they talk with Agamemnon and Achilles, is obviously this final praise of Penelope, and that they say Agamemnon says the gods will. Yeah, this is line 210 and on. Happy Odysseus, what a fine, faithful wife you've won. The fame of her great virtue will never die. The immortal gods will lift a song for all mankind, a glorious song in praise of self-possessed Penelope. That seems to be this book, right? Like it is the immortal song in praise of Penelope, and so there might be a way of thinking about the vision of the hero, even I'm not doing a full blown feminist reading, but actually that there's some degree in which the text points at Penelope as the hero here, actually, and this is a song raised by the immortal gods in praise of her. So there's another. That's an even more radically different vision of the heroic than Odysseus's triumphant homecoming and long life and final death.
Well, okay, so somewhat of a raw thought, but would that not map onto the fact that if we're having a certain myriad of ways now that glory, that immortal fame can be achieved? In the Iliad, there's not a variance. It's go off and die glorious in battle, and we sing your praises, etc. So Achilles is the kind of thematic incarnate, and that's what we see as the template.
Yes.
So here, though, your statements, what I want to map them onto is the fact that Homer uses the word arete to describe Penelope, which of this excellence,
Right.
that has to represent some type of maturation of the understanding of what it means to be an excellent human being. Because and please push back if I have a misunderstanding here, but that arete, that excellence, particularly in the Iliad, is tethered to military prowess, to your capacity in war and these types of things, right? So there's a certain way you could say, well, Achilles is the most arete, the most excellent, because no one can defeat him in battle, right? He can't be defeated, therefore he's the most excellent of humans. To give that term to a woman makes you really stop. And what you see there, and I don't want to give a full Platonic reading here, but you start to see an antecedent to the understanding that arete is tethered to the teleology of the thing. So you have to be an excellent thing, right? So it's not just military prowess across the board. It's, well, Penelope was an excellent woman. She was an excellent wife, right? Compared to Clytemnestra and etc. So I wonder then if you, and maybe, maybe my substructure is wrong and you can cut it out for me if you want, but then does that not map onto the fact that then Penelope can have her own glory that is different and distinct from maybe the glory of Achilles or the glory lost by Agamemnon or the glory that Odysseus has as the king who returns home? That here she receives immortal glory because she was excellent according to her teleology, to her purpose. She was the faithful wife. She's the matchless queen of cunning, etc. I mean, is that an argument that we can make? And by the way, I don't. Hold on, Justin Jackson.
Speaking as Hillsdale College's leading feminist, let me interject.
I just want to before I get yelled at, I just want to point out that I want to point out the guys mowing. We're outside. We mow the same thing over and over again 45 times. I just want to point out that I don't find that to be any type of feminist read. I simply find it to be tethered to the text. And those who have listened to me the whole time, hold on, because I have a whole nother shoe to drop that I don't know how you'll take it. You'll probably, you'll yell. So regardless. And so is the fact that earlier in the book, I was actually very much struck by how little Penelope played into Athena's original plan. That when she goes to Telemachus, it's like, listen, marry her off. She could go something else. The idea is your father's coming home. Penelope has to either get on board or leave. And I think that's where you get the Clytemnestra, Oresteia, Orestes comparisons of like, hey, listen, if Penelope gets out of line, you kill her. You move on, right? And so I think, because again, I look for these, I really like the idea of the poetic dialectic. I don't think these things are always, I think these things are held in tension to one another. But I really think that reading can be rooted in the text without having to import any type of modern ideology to it.
So I agree 100%. And I hope all of your readers, listeners, will understand that you have two profs from Hillsdale College, which is the most conservative college in the country, Christian nationalists, I don't know, Nazis, blah, 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 who actually don't give pause to your feminist reading, because it seems to me it's rooted in the text. Anything that's rooted in the text, you can go to the outside culture and ask questions of it, of course. Of course you do. But again, what will the outside culture teach you? The outside culture will teach you men can just sleep with women willy-nilly and boys will be boys. Women, you can't go to the marketplace. You just can't. You understand? So boys will be boys. And yet, sorry, you've pricked me here. So I'm gonna go on for a bit. And yet, when Odysseus is on Calypso's island, when she was no longer pleasing to him, which we assume there was a point at which she was pleasing to him, he decided to sleep with her no longer. And the narrator tells us she forced him. He did not go to her bed with his own will. Whatever the translation you use, that's what ought to be depicted. My question is simple. Why would an ancient Greek text make that apparent to us? Because we're male readers. And it turns out we're not even readers. We're listeners. Tell us that story. You were sleeping with a goddess, and we're going to be like, dude, that's awesome. How did you get to do that? And then the stupid poem says, I didn't like it. And then we're like, dude, what's your problem? And then it's like, she told me I could be immortal. I could sleep with her, and she makes me breakfast burritos every day of my life. And it's not good enough. That is not an anti-feminist reading. That is a man who loves his wife, who's been told, you have a domestic realm, enjoy. people need to understand on his 10 years, 8 years of those were with Calypso for the love of God. 1 year was with Circe. So 9 out of 10 years was spending time with women who created a nice domestic space. Do you know what heaven is to men? Oh, what a masculine. But it turns out, guess what he doesn't want? He doesn't want that. Here's the feminist reading. He wants a wife in book 23 who doesn't believe him, who rakes him over the coals, who says, I don't believe you. And he says, you're unbelievable. And she fires back and says, you're unbelievable. How many of us have had that discussion? This poem is more realistic than any crap you're reading from 2020 to now. This is far more realistic. This is a woman who's looking at God like Odysseus and saying, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. And it turns out she defeats him. Like the three of us have all been defeated. If you don't admit it, then you're the fish. I know 2 of us admit it. Deacon, you're on the hot spot here.
Thank you.
You're the fish. This is a beautiful moment of a feminism our present day feminism could never actually imagine. She's smart. She's wily. She's just like he is. And she will undo him. What are the stupid narratives we play by? And this is a patriarchal society. I don't have but 2 fingers to give to you all. I'm sorry. It's just beyond belief to me.
One of the things that's difficult about having you on the podcast is that I don't ever really know what you're thinking. It's really hard to tell.
Nor do I.
The subtleties that are
Oh yes, I know from my subtle
right.
thoughts.
I do think one of the things that you raised that I think is really key is, why does Homer run interference on Odysseus sleeping with a goddess? Because I agree with you. We have to separate that Christian kind of recalcitrance, knee-jerk reaction, like, oh yeah, this is adultery. Oh, he's just giving an excuse. He doesn't have to give an excuse to his Homeric audience.
Boys will be boys, baby.
But he does it with Circe too. Yep. Hermes tells him to sleep with her.
His own men say, what are we even doing here after a year? Have you not gotten yourself all of your jollies? What are we even doing here?
The other thing too that was really
clearly has issues.
The other thing that I had never noticed, and it was pointed out to me by one of the professors from Wyoming Catholic, is that Odysseus is never said to have taken a slave girl. He's one of the very few Achaean kings that's ever said of. You know, Nestor has them, Menelaus has them, obviously Agamemnon has them, Achilles has them. Odysseus is never said to take one. Yeah. Now, granted, it does say when he raids Ismarus that they take women, but he's never said to take one. And so that's one thing that I'm still wrestling with in this text is, then what is it that you almost come full circle? So then is Homer trying to present that there is something unique about Odysseus in the way that he views his wife and his relationship to her, that he has to have these ethical, these interferences that he does, that he doesn't take the slave girl. So we've almost come full circle here to like, oh wait, maybe there is something unique about Odysseus and that Homer's trying to present us to. And that's something I'm still kind of contemplating. Okay. But moving forward, we got to move forward. We have to finish the book. Everyone's waited 12 weeks. We got to finish the book. I'm assuming at some point, Dr. Whalen has to go home, right? We can't keep him here all day.
Never. No. Never. He's got 42 kids. He hates them all. He doesn't want anything to do with them.
He's never going to come back
to his office. He'll be happy.
Yeah, this is his first and last time never come on Stand the Great Books podcast. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. I was really, so let's look at the scene with Laertes. So maybe Dr. Whalen, you can kick us off, because I was really I think that was a brilliant comparison that you made earlier, that between the Penelope and Laertes, that in both cases, Odysseus seems to come in, he's going to be the man of twists and turns. He's going to have the lies that he wraps himself in, right? He's going to have this rhetoric. And in both ways, he seems to break, right? The bed, he seems to have, for lack of a better term, an emotional reaction. And here too, with Laertes, then he
Yeah.
has this reaction as well. So how do you read this scene?
Yeah. It is at line like what 357. When he sees he's spinning his story to Laertes, and when he sees Laertes, this black cloud of grief come over him, then Odysseus's heart shuddered, a sudden twinge went shooting up through his nostrils. Like we get such visceral details here. But yeah, I think actually both times, both with Penelope and with Laertes, it's actually an emotional a loss of control emotionally that then in his passions that actually leads to him breaking down. So I think that's parallel. In both cases, he thought he was going to sort of test or trick them, and in both cases, he's undone in that. One of the interesting things to me in this exchange with Laertes, though, is that then Laertes demands a sign of proof that you're actually Odysseus. He says, "Give me a sign of proof." And Odysseus trots out the old common proof. Look, I've got this scar. And what's interesting in the text is that the text, we get no detail about Laertes and whether that's convincing or not. So at line 372, he says, "Autolycus, and collect the gifts he vowed to give me once when he came to see us here." And then, Fagles gives us a space here, because what's funny is Laertes' silence. He doesn't say, "Oh, the scar. Yeah, that's proof you're my beloved son." Instead, he waits further. And so it's like Odysseus is, I got to offer some other proof. So then it's, or these trees. Let me tell you the trees you gave me years ago. I begged you for everything I saw, a little boy trailing you through the orchard, picking our way among the trees, and you named them one by one. You gave me 13 pear, 10 apple trees, and 40 figs. This to me is an interesting parallel to the sort of marital proof that Penelope needs from Odysseus. This is the parental proof, the shared loving memory, which couldn't be fabricated, is greater proof than a scar writ on his body. And that's and it's interesting that Homer even uses the line 384, living proof, he says. Yeah, because it's this living memory of this relationship they had when he was a boy. So it's living proof, literally. And I like that point. There's one more thing. This just struck me this year. I'd not seen this before. I don't know what to make of it, except that the proof for Penelope with the bed and here with Laertes ends up both having to do with trees. They're like living planted trees that are rooted in the earth, as you pointed out earlier, Deacon, and that are there being tended to. So I think that's interesting as well.
Yeah, they're both the trees. They're both rooted. They're both fecund in a certain way. They're both relational.
I'll say this. In my youth, I hated Odysseus for both. I hated him. And I'll say this. I think I've gotten over his stuff with Penelope because I could never understand it until I understood her strength. And she's an equal to Odysseus, I think, in the poem. I'm sorry to go back to book 23. Forgive me. I know we're in book 24, but I think it will give us some insight here. When he's with his wife, the text, and it could just be, and I tell my students this, and all your listeners should know, when you read a translation, the Greek was written in dactylic hexameter. There's a certain meter to it, and they memorized it. They don't have it in the nice book you have. You guys went through all this. But what that means is over the years, the story kind of evolves and changes and blah, 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 whatever the case may be. But what I love about Penelope is that one of the final, if it's not the final, I think there's one more that comes after it. Nevertheless, the great, I'll just I'll just throw in that adjective to make it seem really important. The great epic simile at the end of the poem is actually with Penelope, and it uses it in a way to say it was as if she had gone across the great waters. She's there with all of her, in other words, it narrates the entirety of Odysseus's hardships. And what I think it's trying to do in its 12 lines is to say, whatever you thought he was undergoing, she was undergoing. That, to me, is an amazing insight in a patriarchal world.
Yeah, no, very good.
I hope everyone understands the import of that. You thought of Odysseus's homecoming? Did you ever really think about Penelope's embrace of the homecoming? Because if you hadn't, and I think Homer's willing to admit, yeah, I wasn't too concerned about that. I think he's willing to admit that. But in this last moment, to have her embraced by an epic simile, how she embraces her husband is she comes back, but she's the one who's been on everything he's been with. Any of us who've been married, yeah, we get that. So that would be step one. Step two of that final line was a theme, which I don't know. I haven't watched all of the episodes yet. I look forward to being able to see them all.
For the record, I just imagine you yelling at.
I do. I just scream at them.
That's how I imagine you listening
Just
to a
fine.
podcast. That's fine.
It turns out I have a very generous college. I have broken 4 laptops, and they just keep replacing them. And I'm fine with that. I'm good with it. But when we see a theme come to dawn and say, hold back the sunrise a bit, my God, I think that's one of the most powerful lines in all of literature I've ever seen. I'm a Heideggerian by nature. Please don't let your readers just die amongst themselves. I love Heidegger. I love being in time. Let me show you how it plays out, because I think this whole poem has been a meditation on time and the fleeting of time and immortality and what that means in our lives. We've seen Achilles in Hades just going, let me be alive. And at the end of all this, I think the technical term in Greek is bullshit. All of this, let us meditate upon this. And the very least the gods can do for us, the very least, is hold back a little time to let us recapture that time. And if your people think in an Aristotelian way, you can never make up for that. That's the point. You can never make up for it, except in that one moment. And she's peeled away the moment for us. If you ask me, where do I end this poem? I end it at book 23 with Odysseus and Penelope, because I think it's perfect. I also think the ultimate trilogy in film is Toy Story. Do not watch 4. My God, there's a 5. Stop. Don't watch them. Watch only the first 3. That's my point. We need to stop it somewhere. I don't need 24. I know the poem needs it. I do not think it's another hand that does it. So I'm not going with the late 19th century, early 20th. I'm not doing that. I just don't know that we need 24. I've got 23. I have a husband and a wife reconciled. It's all he's desired. It's all he wants. Has he jacked everything up? Is he a stupid king? Could you ever create peace through the ways in which he's done it? No. Do I love the fact that he's got his wife in his arms and everything is good? This is about as Shakespearean as a comedy as I can get. Thank you, Homer. Thank you. Then we get book 24. So I just want to say that because I think book 23 is as perfect as it can get. And it is the salvation of the entire poem. I don't know that book 24 is. You gave me book 23, and then it's like, I've got to turn a page. Okay, I'm not sure what I get after this. And so I leave it at that. I think the relationship between Odysseus and Penelope, I think, is at the forefront of the entire thing. I think she gets the best of him in book 23. I think he's outdone. And book 24 will be what it will be. But I want to make sure we have book 23 nailed down before we go to book 24, because I don't know what to make of it. But book 23, I know what to make of it. This is a good place. This is a good space. The little boy, Telemachus, has been told, shut up, boy. You don't know what you're talking about in manifold ways. By the way, I think in terms of epic literature, Ben, and correct me here, do we have another character development in any epic literature like we do with Telemachus? I don't think we do. Epic literature is like, hey, here's a character we know, Odysseus. Let's throw him in different situations and see how it goes, which is awesome, by the way. I don't know how we lost that as a narrative appeal, but I love it. But do you know of anything that is character growing with regards to Telemachus? Because I think he grows. Is there anything?
I would make an argument too. I mean, to tether your comment back to Dr. Whalen's as well. I think Odysseus has a certain maturation. I think that he is tested and prepared for the return to Ithaca. But I find that really fascinating in the observations that Dr. Whalen has provided on both Penelope and Laertes. For just two examples, like when he's with the Phaeacians, Broadsea is able to prick him, right? Broadsea is able to prick him and he has this thermotic reaction. He gets angry and he slips. He mentions that he was in Troy when he does that. And it starts to give away who he is, right? King Alcinous is watching these things. And then later, when they sing of the I can't remember, I think it's the Trojan horse, or maybe it's the strife of Achilles and Odysseus, one of the two, or maybe both. He cries. And that also, so that's not thermotic, if you will. He's not that anger, right? It's a different emotional reaction. And it starts to give away who he is. So one way that I read it this time through is that, yes, his journey is punitive, but in certain ways it's also pedagogical to him. It's preparing him to return to Ithaca. Because if you make that mistake when you're disguised as a beggar in the middle of all the suitors, you're dead, right? So what's interesting to me is that then he's prepared like that, not to let the mask slip, not to break, not to allow his emotions. And he does so during the beggar episode, right? They throw the ox at him, they throw the stool at him, they do all these things, and he takes it quietly with his mind churning of bloody work. Here, with both Penelope and Laertes, he slips, he breaks, and I think that's a really interesting comparison with the people that are actually close to him, that he has these emotional connections to, that he can't do it the same way, and there doesn't seem to be anything that prepares him to be able to keep that rhetorical mask on, and that's something I'd like to think about more. Okay, but what do we take of the end of this text, right? So let's just play us out a little bit. So they go to the country estate. We have Laertes. We have this reunion between them. And then we get this character, Dolius. Is that however we want to pronounce him? So I didn't give him much thought the first time I read the Odyssey. It's like, okay, we're getting a new character. There's 4 pages left in this text. Okay, great. What really caught my attention, I think this was shared by one of the guests in 2024, and I went back and looked at it this time, is that he's the father of Melanthius.
Mhm.
He's the father of the goat herd who was basically tortured and then suffered what I would arguably set forth as the worst death that we get in the entire Homeric corpus. And here is the father with his loyal sons defending the king. But it's not even clear to me that Dolius even understands what has happened. Because Dolius wants to send a message. Doesn't he want to send a message to Penelope?
Yes.
Yeah, so he clearly doesn't even know what's happened. So one of the guys that's defending Odysseus, that's about to attack, defend the attack from the suitors blood avengers, their fathers and brothers and things like that, is a guy who is the father of one of the dead suitors who isn't aware that he's dead, and he was also the worst one.
Mhm.
I mean, what is Homer the teacher doing here in the kind of twilight of this text? I mean, it's not a rhetorical point on my end. I don't know. I don't know what he's doing here to introduce this character here and have a loyal father who doesn't know what has happened to his son help defend his king.
I mean, one possible answer, I don't know, is just if to look at that question in light of the fact that Athena has to intervene, and at the end, and not only does Athena have to intervene, but then even famously around line 590, Athena commands them to make peace at once, and the rest of them run away back to the city. But Odysseus, gathering all his force, swooped like a soaring eagle. So Odysseus is so angry at this moment, or caught up in the Iliad again, that it takes not just Athena screaming her godlike scream, but actually a thunderbolt from Zeus to even make him stop, and then she commands peace, and they hand it down. And it's so pat that it seems to me on an artistic level for Homer, he wants us to feel the abruptness and perhaps the way in which it's not satisfying in terms of psychology or explanation. It's satisfying only in terms of even when the king gets back, he's cleaned his own house and he's reunited with his wife. Still, to reestablish the polis in peace, it requires divine intervention. And so that might be, again, the answer that we can give with Dolius, which is actually this is such a fractured, such a violently destroyed society here. Odysseus has effectively destroyed 2 generations of men from this island, the ones who went with him to Troy, and now all the suitors who are left, who have grown up since then. That it takes a miracle for any sort of pacts of peace and the reestablishment of the political order. I mean, that's a sort of a negative reading too, because actually, in my view, the gods are much more distant. That's part of Odysseus's complaint. Where were you, Athena, for all these years? So the gods are more distant here, and yet the poem seems to end by pointing out how messed up the human relations are, and that it takes the gods to fix their relations.
Yeah, I think that's very good. Yeah, that Deus ex machina ending, the god of the machine that's just going to come down and fix things. I think, let me push into that a little bit, like something I was thinking about this time. I really want to read this alongside Zeus's commentary on Aegisthus in book 1. So we have book 1, in which Zeus is like, I don't know why all these mortals keep saying that we're the source of all their problems. Look at Aegisthus. We told him not to do this thing, and then he went off and did it, and he's caused all kinds of problems. It's not our fault. Okay, first off, I think I laughed out loud the first time I read that, because I had just finished reading the Iliad. And I was like, are you kidding? Like, there's everything in the Iliad just seems so terribly fatalistic. I mean, Hector can't even die until they tell him to. They just keep bringing him back and back and throwing him into the meat grinder. So here, I was really kind of trying to contemplate, because I think on a first read, I find the Odyssey to have a lot more human agency, a lot more human choice. The gods take a step back and these kind of things. But I wonder, like, how much of that is really true. Like, how much of this is really like the machinations of Athena, and the divine is still percolating through all of these things. And I think one way you could read it, and I'm just as a position, is I'm not even entirely sure Odysseus, like, to what degree does Odysseus want to kill all the suitors? To what degree does the divine force him into this as he's the avenger? I think there's a way to read it that he's the avenger of certain sacred rites that he violated, and he has to come back and do this. But it's interesting for him to do the carnage and then make his statements of not glorying over the dead. But Athena, and remember, it's Athena who will not let there be a metanoia. The suitors, time and time again, start to be like, nope, something's wrong. And only does Athena like push them and say, nope, you're not leaving. She at times makes them worse. And there's even like that scene that's like a very, it's like a somewhat like demonic, like the daemons, if you will, they take them over, and it says like their laughs aren't even their own
Yeah.
laughs. It like contorts them. So I was wondering this time, like, to what degree book 20, if you take all that, which there's a lot of ifs there, but if you take all that, that really a lot of this is still the machinations of the gods. And Odysseus, notice too how much Odysseus has human agency until he gets back to his house. And then he constantly just says to Telemachus, we're only doing stuff when Athena says so. I'm just looking for that sign. It's not, we have enough power, it's time to strike. It's not like discursive reasoning on his part. It's not him talking to his own thumos, which we've seen several times in the text. It's straight up, I'm like, Odysseus is staring at Athena and Telemachus is staring at Odysseus. And this is our chain of action of when we can actually do something. So I really wondered this time as I read through it, that then the gods have to come down and just like cause peace. In a lot of ways, they're also the ones that did all this. I mean, think of Poseidon's rage. Think of Athena's intercessions. Think of Zeus's, the whole Trojan War, everything. And I really am trying to figure out how to hold this in juxtaposition with Zeus's commentary on human fate and agency in book 1 versus the divine interventions that we see in book really 22 through 24.
I'm happy to go on this one. This is how I teach the poem.
How do you teach it? Tell me.
I think the poem is an existential meditation on existence itself. And the answer is a wife. So let's just bracket that. Can we do that? That you want immortality, you want glory, you want all that? Turns out, no, you don't. Guess what you want? You want a good wife. So that's step 1 in the poem. Okay. All of the things you bring up, I think the poem tackles that head on in a literal way. Laertes in book 2 says, after they see, this is important, the eagle, this is how they read. So when they read signs, they'll read them from birds in the air. They read them from entrails. Entrails are the guts of animals that they pour out. Howsoever they pour out, they read them, and then that gives you your future. In this text, they like the birds. So birds come flying overhead, eagles, and they're fighting, and one eagle overcomes the others. And Laertes says something along the lines, this is book 2. This is about the suitors. Let them walk away. Let them correct them. Let us correct them. Better yet, let them correct themselves. I forget what the Greek is, but it's close to that. Okay, that's Laertes at the beginning. These guys are no good. And the prophecy is not, the gods are going to, so we would think the eagle crushing other eagles is very clear. Odysseus is coming home. He's going to mess you up. Laertes says, blah, blah, blah. You all know what you're doing is wrong. Go away. And then he says, we hope they go away. All right, that's book 2. And just within 50 lines, 50, maybe, let me just see. What is this? 165 to 240, 80 lines later. 80. I was close. 80 lines later, Mentor steps up. if you're going to listen to someone in a text, anyone who's named Mentor, good clue. Listen to Mentor. He also has the last lines of the poem. Yeah, in the disguise of a theme. Yeah, go with Mentor. Mentor says, and I want to read this because to me this is important. And you guys aren't going to like my reading at all, but that's okay. I exist to irritate you, I think. That's my whole point. Mentor says, with regards to Odysseus, he says, line 230, I'm using Lattimore's. I'm not going through Fagel's. It'll be around there. He says, no longer now let one who is a sceptered king be eager to be gentle and kind. Be one whose thought is schooled in justice. Now, all of you, Father Deacon, can only think of this in terms of Aristotelian justice. This for that. I'm not convinced that's what they're talking about here. Something very different, I think. But let him always rather be harsh. That's not what you were expecting. When we say justice in the West, what we automatically mean is what? To be harsh. What is the text saying? We want him to abide by justice. Don't let him be harsh. Step one. Step one. And act severely. We don't want him to do that. We want him to be just, not harsh, or to act severely. Seeing the way no one of the people he was lord over remembers God like Odysseus, and he was kind like a father. Please remember that. All I want to suggest to your listeners here is one simple premise. Anything you saw from Odysseus was a reckoning, but it was not justice by the terms of the poem. If you want to feel good about yourself because this was justice, by the terms of the poem, this was not justice. This was a reckoning. This was revenge. It was not justice. You all think of it biblically. This is not biblical in any way, shape, or form. This is a reckoning. What you guys want to imagine is biblical justice, I would say ascribe it to the Odyssey. That would be biblical justice. And you better pray to your merciful God. That is not biblical justice. That's revenge. That's retribution. By the terms of the poem, I hope you understand, I'm not being Christian here.
Okay, hold on.
I'm abiding by the terms of the poem. Now, please hammer me.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. So in that reading that we see that Odysseus was actually kind like a father.
Yes.
And we can tether that. So I'm trying to give credence to your reading here. If I wanted to support your reading, this is what I would do. And we see this in the swineherd too. Something that's always caught my attention is that the swineherd speaks to Odysseus very differently than what we saw with Odysseus and his men in the war. The swineherd has a very different perception of King Odysseus. So when then you read the slaughter of the suitors, do you read that as that is what Odysseus would have done? Or that is what Odysseus is being asked to do? Or that is what Odysseus can only do because the gods will support him? Because he knows very well he cannot do this unless Athena says yes. Because even if he could pull off the slaughter, he can't handle the Avengers. So
that's what he says in book 23. He says to Telemachus flat out, when you've killed but one man, you got to run because all those people are coming after you. We've slaughtered the best of everyone who's around here. that should give your readers pause about Odysseus. I think you guys can disagree. Again, I put my cards on the table. Your readers should know I'm a pacifistic reader. I don't like violence. I like to avoid it as much as I possibly can. Eurymachus used Antinos as a scapegoat. He did. I don't know that you guys covered it, and I don't want to screw up whatever you guys have. But he did. It's like, that's an out. Just use it. He won't. Odysseus, he knows what he wants, and what he wants is a reckoning. I think what the gods want is a reckoning. Again, I don't know how to get out of it. I just know I've got a simple premise. This is a reckoning and not justice by the terms of the poem. I hope you understand. I'm not invoking Augustine. I'm not invoking Aquinas. I'm not invoking any ecumenical council at all whatsoever. I'm going by the terms of the poem. The terms of the poem is justice would be to act like a father and to be merciful. To act otherwise is a reckoning. It's retribution. That's what Odysseus desires. The only thing I'm telling your readers to understand is that if you're torn and you like Odysseus, but you don't know how to square that circle, it may be that circle cannot be squared. What he did was unjust. What he did was a reckoning. What he did was revenge. I don't know that I would do otherwise. I would probably make it worse. Nevertheless, I'm not letting the dude off the hook. He is not just by their own terms. He is doing precisely what the gods and the poem has told us he's going to do. Whether or not that is just is not up to me. You can decide. I just know by the terms of the poem, it's clearly not just. Just would be a father-like approach. Just maybe, if we want to really go with the Telemachus, is the growth. Does he learn? Telemachus has a very different response to Odysseus during the slaughter. Telemachus knows some of these guys. Telemachus may give his father insight. So, I'll leave it at that. I don't think I've cleaned anything up. I think I've made it worse for your listeners. But that's where you exist in this world. For me, Odysseus is not just. I cannot abide by a single thing he did. This is blood feud, of which I want nothing. Thank God I don't live in a blood feud society. Thank God for the rest of you. I do not live in a blood feud. They do. It's a shame culture. That's what we see played out in chapter 24. When your boy gets killed, guess what you do? You kill for your boy. That's what's asked of you.
Right.
Laertes in book 2 tells the suitors, stop. He says, let us stop them. Better yet, let them stop themselves. Laertes shows up again in book 24 to say the same thing for the parents. Your children effed up. I have no better word. Your children effed up. Can we just get beyond it? Can we not do shame culture and blood feud? Turns out they cannot. And it turns out Athena, she loves it. Zeus, not so much. So when we talk about gods, I think we should talk about the gods at the end of the poem. because Zeus is the god. Zeus is the god of domesticity. Athene is the god of war. They say wisdom. That means strategy. She wants to mess people up. You have a father and a daughter in the end saying, how should this end? If your readers are uncomfortable, they well should be. I think it's a god awful or maybe a perfect ending to this poem, because I don't know how we get out of this mess, because we have a mess. That's why I want to end it at book 23. Give an old man his thing. Just a husband and wife embracing and loving each other. Yes, give it to me. Some poet thought it's better. We have a civil war on hand. How's that going to end? That's what we get in book 24. I don't know what to do with it. I'm not comfortable with it, obviously. But I do think it encapsulates all of our hesitations with the poem. If one has any, if you have no hesitations with this poem, you're reading it really badly. You should be conflicted at every moment of this poem, I think. I'll stop. Sorry.
Yeah, I think the contrast there is something I've come to appreciate. So a lot of times there's blood on the floor conversations trying to, paint Odysseus as a hero, as a villain, as just, unjust, etc. One of the things that I've appreciated on this read is, can you notice the contrasts, the juxtapositions? Can you see the tensions? And then I have a thick understanding that I think Homer actually uses those pedagogically. So I'm less interested in, does Odysseus come out as a hero or not on this text? I think it's a really hard claim to make, because I think he does amazing things. I mean, I think saying no to Calypso is where it might be his zenith in the text, as far as like Arete goes. Like what can he actually do there? I think he does a lot of things that I find to be absolutely despicable. But I think the real lesson of the text is, what do those tensions teach us? The book starts with man. That's how it starts. I think Odysseus is analogous to man. And so what do we learn about ourselves? Just a few quick closing thoughts on this, just to throw it out. I'm sure, Dr. Whalen, for those listening on the audio, Dr. Whalen is still actually on this podcast. He's here. He's being very, very patient. We'll see if he ever comes back, but he's being very patient. So, a few things that just stood out to me. One is that in this dialogue where the city finds out that the suitors are there, right? They've been slaughtered. It's interesting to me that one of our assumptions to this whole deal on the two generations that have been lost because of Odysseus, which is mentioned explicitly as a rationale here, is that basically the suitors, one of the reasons is the suitors are all like Telemachus. They suffer a certain fatherlessness. Very intriguing to me that arguably the worst suitor, if you don't consider, Eurymachus the worst, or Eurymachus, this, Antinous, he actually has a father who is present in Ithaca. He's not suffering fatherlessness. His father is there and is the one that gets everything whipped up. I found that to be really fascinating. Just a general, observation there. The other thing too, is the role of Laertes at the end of the poem. So one, you have this kind of, I don't know, it is very thematic. I'm sure Dr. Justin Jackson loves it, but they're all about to go to war together. And you see this kind of like very wonderful, warming scene of Laertes, the grandfather, just being like, what a day for me, dear gods, what a joy, my son and my grandson vying over courage. And then Laertes is the only one who gets to actually shed blood. It's really, Laertes, the one, the etymology there, the one who like gathers people or something along those lines. But then, what is this guy's name? Eupeithes, Antinous' father. He's the only one that's killed. He's killed right in the head. The father of Antinous is speared right in the head. But his name means something along the lines of like easy to be persuaded, or even obedient one. And so we get one shot by Laertes into, which is a whole nother generation. So there's a generational aspect here. We get one shot, guy gets speared right in the head, and then we get the Deus ex machina movement. I mean, any observations on this?
I can't help but that when you get this old man who's suddenly filled with enormous strength and throwing a spear at this other old man who's charging up the hill, it I almost feel like I've entered 20th century theater of the absurd. Like, it just has that, like, I'm almost laughing because it's gotten to the point where I don't know. It's almost ridiculous. I mean, I don't want to downplay the gravity of the violence, and that this is now. I mean, that whole household is wiped out, but at the same time, it just it it seems it's pushed beyond even what we might reasonably expect in such a narrative to something that looks just absurd.
No, I agree. It's a fascinating picture. Two kind of closing thoughts there. One, it's really interesting to me that the master rhetorician, Odysseus, is not the one that addresses the town people. You would think that, the herald has to go out, the bard's with him, we have the prophet. It's all indirect of, hey, why was this done? It's interesting to me that the master rhetorician is not the one who goes out and addresses the polis to say why this had to be done or etc. He immediately gears up for violence.
Yeah.
Immediately. And I think it's noteworthy. The other thing too, just on my own read here, I too have always been somewhat unsettled at the end, right? It seems very rushed. Things are tied up very quickly. We have this kind of Deus ex machina ending, and it's over, right? I really thought that in a lot of ways, the ending that I wanted, I found in the Oresteia. Like the ending that I like, Athena comes in and they're going to hold like a court and they're going to figure out like, okay, here's a blood Avenger model. And is this just Dr. Justin Jackson's about to start screaming? I got to mute him for a second so I can actually finish my thought. So, right, I actually really wanted something like that we actually have a more procedural justice. We have some kind of maturation from the blood Avenger model. We don't get any of that. And I think that comparing the end of this one to then what Aeschylus tries to do at the end of the Oresteia is really fascinating.
All
Okay,
right, so I'll respond.
Okay,
To
Dr.
all
Whalen has
these
to go home at some
these
point.
horrible
I actually am
readings.
just about out of time.
These horrible readings I will tolerate, but I must respond. So a few things going on here. One, I think you're right to see the Oresteia in contradistinction to this, because I think this is far more humane than what the Oresteia is. I do not accept this as some sort of dummy Deus ex machina, because then here's what you have to expect, and I'm going to walk this back. I'm going to begin general and then walk back to specific. If you think the Deus ex machina reading, and now will be historical, cultural, and hopefully people in your chats will correct me with whatever evidence they have. They'll have none, but that's okay. They should correct me nonetheless. I don't know that one, Homer's ending here would have been accepted as Deus ex machina. It could be a version of predestinarianism that you saw in the Iliad. Get over yourself. You thought you saw some exercise of free will in the Odyssey that was in contradistinction to the Iliad, but it turns out at the end of the poem it's not. So shut up, and the gods will do what they're going to do. Obviously, I reject that. I don't think that's what's going on. Okay. The other response would be a softer version of that. This was all supposed to be, if you go back to book 2 with Laertes, when he said, as eagles were gathering, an eagle came down and ripped apart the other birds. And he said, this is a prophecy that Odysseus is coming back. This was back in book 2. It could be that this is the prophecy that's going to be fulfilled. He says, with regards to that prophecy, let them restrain themselves. Let us restrain them, or better yet, let them restrain themselves before destruction comes to them. So what's Laertes doing? He's reading prophetically. That is to say, you guys are jacking this up. He's coming back. Unless you stop what you're doing, this is going to be brutal. He's going to wipe you out. That's step one. Let me just
Right
take
now,
step one.
I do want to jump in because Dr. Whalen has to.
I'm out of
leave.
time, I'm afraid.
Yeah, he's
I've got a kid's baseball game I've got to make.
which is more important than the podcast.
I'm sorry.
So
After all the parenting advice I gave to you, you let your kids play baseball.
So he's your colleague, so I don't have to make any excuses. I mean, you know how this works.
He's my chair come fall.
Well,
I
the
have to
reckoning
abide whatever.
is coming.
So
There's a
you get
reckoning.
us in this bizarro world. He actually has to do
Okay.
what I say.
Yeah, he actually has to go.
And I have to bow down to what he says.
Okay, everyone, listen, Dr. Justin Jackson, we always appreciate it. Wind you up, you go. You make us think. We appreciate it. Dr. Whalen, we appreciate all the words you were able to squeak in. We're gonna have you back on the podcast.
Great.
God bless you being chair. We really appreciate you coming on. Everyone, go check us out on X, YouTube, Facebook, everything else. I will see you all next week. Thank you very much. Okay, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I told you that it was somewhat of a whirlwind, a little bit of a beautiful chaos, but I appreciate Dr. Justin Jackson and Dr. Benedict Whalen coming on and guiding us through the end of the Odyssey, the end of this beautiful tale by Homer. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, I'm very humbled by all the thousands who have joined us for this 12-week study. So where are we going? Well, next week we actually have 2 episodes planned. We have a bonus episode that's just a reaction to the movie, so we'll be posting that. And then the second episode, which I'm personally looking forward to more, is the American Odyssey. And we're going to have a conversation with Dr. Patrick Deneen. He's fantastic, the author of Why Liberalism Failed, about his new book, The American Odyssey. It actually comes out next Tuesday, the same day that our episode will be launched. And then where do we go from there? Well, the week after that, we're actually going to have a conversation on holy eros, looking at eros, erotic love in the Christian tradition, starting with Plato and the Greeks, and then moving into the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the early church fathers, the medievals. Just a quick snapshot of a beautiful concept that is actually very much interwoven with the Western tradition, but somewhat forgotten. And then we're going to get into 4 short, strange little dialogues of Plato. So we're going to read the Hipparchus, and then Lovers, Hippias Minor, and Ion. I've already recorded on all of them. They are short, they're strange, they're wonderful. If you haven't read Plato, it's a good opportunity to do so. So please join us for those dialogues. And then we're going to have Short Story September. So we're going to read 5 short stories, including some Flannery O'Connor and some Robert E. Howard and many more. It's going to be fantastic. And then starting in October 6th, we start Plato's Republic with book 1, an intro with Dr. Alex Preu. It is fantastic. Again, the Republic is probably the most important text in all of Western philosophy. This is a text that if you read slowly, it will change your life. For Plato, there is no way to study philosophy without you yourself becoming a lover of wisdom, without you yourself being conformed to the truth. If you study the beauty of the truth, then you have to have a beautiful soul. Those two are tethered together. And a slow, attentive reading of the Republic is an invitation to live a beautiful life. Right now, we have over 30 episodes planned to walk through the Republic with scholars from all across the nation. I've actually been recording on this for over a year, and I'm very, very excited and ready for it to go live. So again, that starts October 6th. But next week, join us for 2 special episodes, particularly the American Odyssey, Patrick Deneen's new book, then an episode on holy eros, looking at holy erotics inside the Christian tradition and inside the West overall. And again, I just want to say thank you so much for the support, particularly for those of you who support us on Patreon. You make all of this possible. Otherwise, it's just supported by me. So thank you so much again for all of the support. Go check out our Patreon page where we have a whole library of resources to help you read the great books. And I'll see you guys next week. Many, many good things ahead.